My friends, there's a power in silence, a power that many of us overlook. The world is loud. It bombards us with expectations, opinions, and demands, often drowning out the still, quiet voice inside of us. But today we're going to embrace silence, not just as a physical absence of sound, but as a spiritual cleansing. In that silence, we will delete the things that are holding us back from becoming the person we were always meant to be. Self-doubt is one of the most powerful forces that can hinder our growth and progress. It's a quiet voice that whispers in the back of our minds, casting shadows over our dreams and aspirations. It's that persistent thought that tells us we're not good enough, that we don't deserve success, or that we're bound to fail. It convinces us that we don't have the skills, the intelligence, or the talent to achieve our goals. But self-doubt, though persistent and persuasive, is ultimately an illusion, a false narrative we've allowed ourselves to believe. And lastly, I want to share with you that the truth is that God always appears in the light. The origins of self-doubt are often deeply rooted in our past experiences. Perhaps it was a moment when we were criticized by someone we admired, a failure that felt too big to overcome, or comparisons we made with others who seemed to have it all together. These moments, while painful, begin to build a mental framework of insecurity. Over time, this framework becomes a default mode of thinking, a constant nagging belief that we are not enough. But we must recognize that self-doubt is not the truth of who we are. It is simply the echo of past experiences and fears, amplified by the mind's natural tendency to focus on the negative. When we are immersed in self-doubt, we often find ourselves questioning our every decision. We hesitate before taking action, second-guessing our instincts and abilities. This leads to inaction, and we become stuck in a cycle of overthinking, replaying scenarios in our minds, wondering what could go wrong. We might ask ourselves, what if I fail? What if I'm not capable? What if I make a mistake? The danger of this line of thinking is that it paralyzes us. It keeps us from stepping into opportunities, from taking risks, and from pursuing what's truly in our hearts. Self-doubt also shows up in our relationships, influencing how we interact with others. We might feel unworthy of love or acceptance, constantly seeking validation from others to fill the void of our own self-belief. This leads to a constant cycle of external validation seeking, where our sense of self is dependent on the approval of others. The truth is, self-doubt erodes our confidence, leaving us unsure of who we truly are, what we stand for, and what we are capable of achieving. One of the greatest dangers of self-doubt is that it's often invisible. We may appear outwardly confident, but internally we are battling with thoughts of inadequacy. We put on a mask of composure while wrestling with an internal narrative that says we aren't enough. Over time, this internal conflict can lead to anxiety, stress, and even depression as we continuously fight against the voice that says we can't. The irony is that the more we listen to self-doubt, the more power we give it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, feeding into our fears and reinforcing the belief that we are incapable. And we learn to live with that as well. The journey to overcoming self-doubt begins with awareness. We must first recognize that these thoughts are not a reflection of our truth. They are simply the stories we've told ourselves, influenced by past experiences and external pressures. By acknowledging that self-doubt is not a fact, we can begin to challenge its grip. It's important to ask ourselves, is this thought based on truth or fear? Is it serving me or holding me back? From there, we can replace these negative beliefs with empowering truths. Instead of focusing on what could go wrong, we can choose to focus on what could go right. Instead of fixating on our failures, we can acknowledge our strengths and accomplishments. With time, we begin to build a new mental framework, one that encourages us to take risks, to embrace our uniqueness, and to trust in our own abilities. The key is not to rid ourselves of self-doubt entirely, but to no longer let it control our actions. Instead of allowing it to paralyze us, we learn to move forward despite it, knowing that it does not define who we are or what we are capable of. Toxic relationships are among the most insidious and damaging forces in our lives. These are the connections that drain our energy, lower our self-esteem, and keep us from stepping into our full potential. Toxic relationships are not always obvious at first, and they often disguise themselves as caring, supportive, or even loving connections. But over time, they reveal themselves through behaviors that are manipulative, controlling, dismissive, or emotionally abusive. The challenge is recognizing these relationships before they cause irreparable harm to our emotional well-being and sense of self. One of the first signs of a toxic relationship is a pattern of negativity. Whether it's constant criticism, belittling comments, or an overall lack of support, these relationships create an environment where you feel small, unworthy, or inferior. The person involved may undermine your confidence or downplay your successes. Instead of encouraging you to grow, they subtly or overtly try to keep you in a place of dependence or insecurity. The effects of this constant negativity can be profound, making you question your own worth and abilities. Over time, this can erode your sense of self and lead to feelings of confusion and self-doubt. Another hallmark of toxic relationships is emotional manipulation. This can take many forms, from guilt-tripping to gaslighting, where your perceptions and feelings are twisted or invalidated. Someone in a toxic relationship might make you feel responsible for their emotions or happiness, placing the burden of their well-being on your shoulders. You may find yourself constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid conflict or appease them, even when your own needs are neglected. This dynamic can create an unhealthy imbalance, where you lose sight of your own needs and desires in favor of constantly trying to meet theirs. And in a toxic relationship, there may also be an underlying power struggle. The person involved may try to control your actions, decisions, or beliefs, subtly undermining your autonomy. They might attempt to dictate who you can spend time with, what you can wear, or how you should think, all while making you feel guilty for wanting independence or personal space. Over time, this control can suffocate you, limiting your ability to grow, explore, or follow your own path. A toxic relationship also thrives on a lack of respect. Respect for boundaries, feelings, and individuality is essential for healthy connections. But in toxic relationships, boundaries are often ignored or trampled upon. You may find that your thoughts, feelings, and emotions are invalidated, and your boundaries are dismissed. You may express your discomfort or frustration only to be met with defensiveness or even more manipulation. This lack of respect creates a toxic environment where you feel unheard and unseen, and where your voice is not valued. It's important to understand that toxic relationships don't always have to be romantic. They can manifest in friendships, family dynamics, or even professional relationships. No matter the form, these relationships can cause lasting damage if not addressed. The most insidious aspect of a toxic relationship is that it often goes unnoticed until the damage is already done. You may have invested years of your life in someone who, instead of lifting you up, has been pulling you down all along. Breaking free from a toxic relationship requires courage. It's not easy to walk away from someone, especially when they've been a part of your life for a long time. There may be guilt, fear, or even confusion. You may wonder if you're being too sensitive or if you're overreacting, but deep down you know that this relationship is no longer serving you. It's draining you, limiting you, and keeping you from the life you deserve. It's the life the Lord Jesus has given you for a reason you cannot explain. The drawback of the life is so great. The decision to let go of a toxic relationship is not just about the other person. It's about reclaiming your peace, your worth, and your happiness. Recognizing the signs of toxicity, setting firm boundaries, and ultimately walking away may be one of the most empowering steps you can take for your emotional health and future. Unnecessary comparisons are one of the most common traps we fall into in today's world, and they often rob us of our peace, joy, and sense of purpose. It's easy to look around and measure ourselves against others, whether it's in terms of career achievements, relationships, physical appearance, or social status. In the age of social media, these comparisons are more frequent and insidious than ever, as we're constantly exposed to curated snapshots of others' lives. But the danger of comparing ourselves to others is that it distorts our perception of who we are, leading us to feel inadequate, frustrated, and disconnected from our true selves. In our journey, Rich and I were introduced to iron culture. When we compare ourselves to others, we often focus on their strengths while overlooking our own. We see their accomplishments and assume that we're somehow falling short, forgetting that everyone's journey is different. The person we're comparing ourselves to may have faced their own set of challenges, and yet we only see the polished result of their hard work. What we fail to realize is that their path is not our path, and our worth is not defined by their success. But the constant act of comparison leads us into a cycle of self-criticism and discontent. Instead of celebrating our own unique journey, we measure our lives against the highlight reels of others. This cycle of comparison is not just harmful to our self-esteem, it can also stifle our growth. When we're constantly looking outward, trying to emulate someone else's success or lifestyle, we lose touch with our own individuality. We may find ourselves chasing after things that don't even align with our true desires, simply because we've seen someone else achieve them. We forget to ask ourselves what we truly want because we're too preoccupied with what others have. This leads to a lack of direction and purpose. We might end up following someone else's path, only to realize that it's not the right one for us at all. The issue with unnecessary comparisons also lies in the unrealistic standards they create. When we constantly measure our lives against someone else's, we often forget that no one's life is perfect. Social media, in particular, distorts reality by showcasing only the best moments, filtered images, vacation snapshots, and milestones achieved. But behind every photo, behind every success story, there are struggles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. By comparing our real, raw lives to someone else's polished version, we set ourselves up for disappointment. We begin to feel as if we're failing, when in reality we're simply living through the natural ebbs and flows of life. Furthermore, unnecessary comparisons can hinder our ability to embrace gratitude. When we're always looking at what others have and wishing we had it too, we lose sight of the blessings right in front of us. We overlook the progress we've made, the relationships we've built, and the achievements we've accomplished. Comparison breeds discontent, while gratitude nurtures appreciation for what we already have. By constantly comparing ourselves to others, we overlook the unique journey we're on, the lessons we've learned, and the growth we've experienced. God asked us to open our eyes and see beyond what we think we can see. The truth is that we are all on our own individual journeys, and no two paths are the same. The person you're comparing yourself to has their own set of challenges, victories, and circumstances that have shaped them. What works for one person might not work for you, and that's okay. When we stop comparing ourselves to others, we free ourselves to focus on what truly matters to us: our growth, our happiness, and our authenticity. Comparing ourselves to others only creates a sense of lack, but when we focus on our own lives, we recognize how much we have to offer and how far we've come. Because when you look at the details of someone's life, you appreciate the individual person. Unnecessary comparisons also blind us to our own strengths and abilities. Everyone has a unique set of talents and gifts, but when we spend too much time focusing on what others are doing, we forget to appreciate the qualities that make us special. Embracing our individuality and celebrating our own progress, no matter how small it may seem, helps us grow into the person we're meant to be. We all have something valuable to contribute, and that can only be realized when we stop measuring ourselves against someone else's standards. Fear of rejection is a powerful, often paralyzing emotion that many of us experience at some point in our lives. It is a deeply rooted fear that can influence nearly every aspect of our decision-making and behavior. This fear arises from the innate desire to belong, to be accepted, and to be loved. It's the primal instinct that pushes us to avoid situations where we might be excluded, ridiculed, or abandoned. Whether it manifests in our personal relationships, career aspirations, or creative endeavors, the fear of rejection can hold us back from pursuing our dreams and stepping into our full potential. One of the primary reasons for the fear of rejection is our deep-seated need for validation. We often seek approval from others to feel worthy, and when that validation is not given, we interpret it as a personal failure. The fear of rejection becomes amplified when we tie our sense of self-worth to external opinions. If someone doesn't accept us, we may feel as though there's something wrong with us, that we're unlovable, or that we're not enough. This creates a cycle of insecurity where we constantly seek external affirmation to feel good about ourselves, but are simultaneously terrified of receiving any form of criticism or rejection. Another source of this fear lies in our past experiences. If we've faced rejection in the past, whether it was from a friend, a romantic partner, or a professional situation, we may carry that wound with us, believing that future rejection is inevitable. Rejection can feel like a personal attack, especially if it touches on our vulnerabilities or our deepest desires. These past experiences shape the lens through which we view new opportunities, and they often lead us to avoid taking risks for fear of facing the same hurt again. We might convince ourselves that it's safer not to try at all than to risk being rejected once more. The fear of rejection often manifests as self-doubt and hesitation. It causes us to second-guess our decisions and to hold back from putting ourselves out there. Whether it's in a job interview, a romantic relationship, or an artistic endeavor, the fear of rejection keeps us from fully expressing ourselves. We might wonder, what if they don't like me? What if they think I'm not good enough? What if I fail? These questions can become overwhelming, and the thought of rejection can paralyze us, preventing us from taking the very steps that could lead us to success. In many cases, this fear leads to procrastination and missed opportunities, as we convince ourselves that the risk of rejection is not worth it. Rejection is also tied to the fear of being misunderstood. Many of us have a deep desire to be seen and heard for who we truly are, and when we fear rejection, it's often because we worry that others won't understand us. We fear that if we reveal our true selves, our ideas, or our talents, we might be met with indifference or disapproval. This fear of not being accepted for who we are can prevent us from fully embracing our individuality and sharing our gifts with the world. We may hide parts of ourselves, wear masks, or adapt to fit into societal expectations, all in an effort to avoid the sting of rejection. I envied the fact that Lily only had to wear one mask while in SCORE. The irony of the fear of rejection is that it can prevent us from connecting with others in meaningful ways. When we withdraw or hide our true selves to avoid rejection, we deny ourselves the opportunity to form genuine relationships. Rejection, while painful, is a natural part of life and growth. It is impossible to connect with everyone, and not everyone will understand or appreciate what we have to offer. But if we allow the fear of rejection to rule our lives, we miss out on the chance to find those who truly see and value us. By embracing rejection as part of the process, we can learn not to take it personally and recognize that it doesn't diminish our worth. Rejection simply means that something or someone is not aligned with our path, and it opens the door for new opportunities and experiences. Overcoming the fear of rejection requires a shift in mindset. We must begin to view rejection not as a reflection of our worth, but as a necessary step toward growth. It is not the end of the road, it's merely a detour, redirecting us toward what is meant for us. When we stop fearing rejection, we open ourselves up to possibilities that we would have otherwise missed. We begin to take risks, pursue our dreams, and be more authentic in our relationships and endeavors. By embracing rejection, we can transform it from a source of fear into a powerful tool for personal development and success. Perfectionism is often portrayed as a positive trait in society, associated with high standards, exceptional achievement, and excellence. However, the reality is that perfectionism is a double-edged sword, one that can paralyze us, prevent growth, and rob us of peace. It's the belief that nothing we do is ever good enough, that there is always room for improvement, and that any flaw or imperfection is a failure. While striving for quality and improvement is a natural human inclination, perfectionism takes this drive to an extreme, creating unrealistic expectations that can hinder personal growth, increase stress, and lead to burnout. Hannah? At its core, perfectionism stems from an intense desire for approval, acceptance, and validation. The perfectionist often measures their self-worth by their accomplishments, believing that their value is determined by how flawlessly they perform or how well they meet the standards set by themselves or others. This mindset creates a constant pressure to be perfect, to never show vulnerability, and to avoid making mistakes at all costs. It's rooted in the belief that if something is not done perfectly, it is not worth doing at all. This fear of imperfection can be so overwhelming that it keeps individuals from even starting certain projects or taking risks because the fear of not meeting their own standards is too great. Perfectionism also fosters a toxic relationship with failure. For a perfectionist, failure is not just a setback, it's a personal indictment of their abilities and self-worth. Every mistake, every shortcoming is seen as evidence that they are not good enough. This mindset leads to a constant cycle of self-criticism and self-doubt, where any flaw or failure is magnified and turned into something far more significant than it really is. Instead of viewing mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow, the perfectionist sees them as catastrophic events that must be avoided at all cost. This fear of failure can paralyze progress as the individual becomes too afraid to try new things, make decisions, or take action for fear of not being perfect. Moreover, perfectionism often leads to chronic stress and burnout. The constant striving to meet impossibly high standards takes a toll on both mental and physical health. The pressure to be perfect in every aspect of life, whether at work, in relationships, or in personal pursuits, can leave little room for relaxation, enjoyment, or self-compassion. The perfectionist is often caught in a never-ending cycle of work, self-criticism, and self-sacrifice, believing that they are only worthy when they are achieving or performing at their peak. This mindset leads to exhaustion, anxiety, and a sense of never being enough, even after achieving success. The very pursuit of perfection becomes an endless and exhausting race with no finish line in sight. One of the most damaging aspects of perfectionism is how it impacts creativity and innovation. When we are focused on getting everything perfect, we become paralyzed by fear of failure or judgment, which stifles creativity. The perfectionist may hesitate to share ideas, try new approaches, or take risks because they are too concerned with how the result will be perceived. This fear of imperfection limits the ability to experiment, make mistakes, and ultimately innovate. Creativity thrives in an environment where imperfection is not only accepted, but embraced, where mistakes are seen as learning experiences that propel us forward. Perfectionism, however, creates an environment of rigidity and restriction, preventing the very experimentation that leads to growth and new ideas. Another consequence of perfectionism is the damage it does to relationships. The perfectionist may impose their high standards on others, expecting them to meet the same level of excellence in every area of life. This can lead to frustration, disappointment, and tension, as the perfectionist's expectations are often unrealistic or unattainable. Relationships become transactional, based on performance rather than authentic connection. The perfectionist may also struggle to accept vulnerability in others, as they themselves fear showing weakness or imperfection. This creates a barrier to true intimacy and emotional connection, as both partners feel the need to present a perfect image of themselves rather than being open and honest with each other. While striving for excellence is admirable, the pursuit of perfection can be detrimental to our mental health, our personal growth, and our relationships. Perfectionism traps us in a cycle of self-criticism, fear of failure, and an unrelenting desire to meet impossible standards. It prevents us from embracing our true selves and from appreciating the beauty of imperfection. Letting go of perfectionism doesn't mean abandoning high standards or goals, but rather accepting that mistakes are part of the process, that growth comes from failure, and that our worth is not defined by our ability to be flawless. In order to live fully, we must learn to release the grip of perfectionism and embrace the imperfect journey that leads us toward becoming the best version of ourselves. Past failures are one of the heaviest emotional burdens many of us carry throughout our lives. There are the moments where things didn't go as planned, when we didn't measure up to our own expectations, or when we fell short in front of others. These failures, whether personal, professional, or relational, often feel like scars that define who we are, whispering to us that we're not capable of succeeding in the future. However, our past failures do not have to be a permanent reflection of our worth or potential. They are simply chapters in a much larger story, and they can be reframed as powerful lessons that propel us forward rather than hold us back. The weight of past failures often comes from our inability to separate our actions from our identity. When we fail, it's easy to internalize that failure and believe that it reflects who we are as people. We start to see ourselves as failures rather than simply seeing that we made a mistake or encountered an obstacle. This can be especially damaging because it can create a cycle of shame where we become afraid to try again for fear of repeating past mistakes. The fear of failure can become so paralyzing that we avoid taking any risks, staying stuck in the safety of our comfort zone where we believe we won't fail again. This mindset, however, keeps us trapped in a place of stagnation, unable to grow or reach our true potential. Additionally, past failures can breed self-doubt. The negative thoughts that emerge after we fail often convince us that we aren't capable of success, that we'll never get it right, or that we're not smart enough, talented enough, or worthy enough to achieve our dreams. These thoughts can be incredibly powerful, influencing how we view ourselves and shaping our actions. If we constantly revisit our failures, we begin to see them as evidence of our inadequacy, even though failure is a natural part of any growth process. We forget that every successful person has encountered setbacks, made mistakes, and faced rejection. It's how they responded to those failures that determined their eventual success. The key is not to see failure as a reflection of our worth, but as a valuable part of the learning process. Another way past failures affect us is through the lens of regret. We may look back at missed opportunities, relationships that didn't work out, or decisions we wish we could undo, and we are consumed by the feeling of what could have been. The tendency to ruminate on these moments creates a sense of lost time and wasted potential, making it difficult to move forward. Regret can cloud our ability to see the good that came from those failures. Sometimes the most difficult moments of our lives lead to the most important lessons, the greatest growth, and the deepest wisdom. When we constantly dwell on the past, we miss out on the opportunities present in the here and now. We may also miss the lessons those failures were trying to teach us, which could ultimately guide us toward our next breakthrough. In relationships, past failures can create a fear of vulnerability. If we've been hurt or rejected in the past, we may become hesitant to open ourselves up again for fear of experiencing the same pain. This can prevent us from forming new connections or fully investing in relationships that could be positive and enriching. We might begin to build walls around our hearts, believing that protecting ourselves from potential failure means we won't get hurt again. However, avoiding vulnerability leads to isolation and limits our ability to experience deep, meaningful connections. It's only through embracing vulnerability, acknowledging that we may fail again, but trusting that failure won't define us, that we can truly heal and grow. One of the most powerful steps in overcoming the impact of past failures is reframing our perspective on them. Rather than viewing them as permanent marks on our lives, we can see them as stepping stones on our path to success. Each failure contains valuable insights, lessons about what worked, what didn't, and how we can approach the future with greater wisdom. And instead of carrying the weight of our failures as burdens, we can choose to view them as experiences that shaped us into who we are today. They do not have to define our future, they simply inform it. Embracing this mindset allows us to release the hold that past failures have on our present, giving us the freedom to move forward with confidence, resilience, and hope. In life, we all face challenges that shape us, whether it's dealing with past failures, toxic relationships, the fear of rejection, unnecessary comparisons, self-doubt, or the pursuit of perfection. These experiences, while painful at times, are not meant to define us, but to refine us. They offer valuable lessons that can guide our growth if we allow ourselves to embrace them rather than avoid them. The key is to shift our perspective, understand that setbacks are part of the process, and choose not to let fear or negativity hold us back. We have the power to release what no longer serves us, be it self-imposed limitations, unhealthy connections, or unrealistic expectations, and step into our true potential. By acknowledging our struggles and embracing the lessons they offer, we can begin to live more authentically, with greater confidence and a deeper understanding of our worth.